Welcome to Understanding Communication. This webinar is designed for people affected by dementia, primarily for those caring for or connected to someone who is living with dementia, but also for those who are living with dementia themselves. Some of the information may not be applicable to your current situation, but may become more relevant in the future as the disease progresses. If you have any questions or concerns, I encourage you to connect with the First Link Dementia Helpline at 1-800-936-6033. The number will also appear on the last slide. So what is person-centered communication? What do you think it means? We have a phrase that says that every person, regardless of their losses, maintains a core of self that can be reached. When you look at this slide and you see three very different people, do you think that each of the three people pictured here will have exactly the same care needs, exactly the same wants? A person-centered philosophy views people with dementia first and foremost as individuals with unique attributes, personal values, and history. So, how might you use a person-centered approach to shape the way that you communicate with the person that you are caring for? Even though the disease has changed how your family member or friends thinks and communicates, they are still a unique person. They are still a wife, husband, mother, father, sister, brother, grandmother, grandfather. They're still shaped by their cultural backgrounds, beliefs, values, career interests, life experiences. They may still have stories to tell, to relive, and to teach valuable lessons from. And they can still feel strong emotional connections, even though they may not be able to articulate them or demonstrate them in the way that they once were able to. It's important that we understand and recognize that the disease is causing physical changes to happen in the person's brain, and that those changes are causing their symptoms. Oftentimes, a person with dementia looks quite healthy, maybe even normal on the outside, which makes it difficult for caregivers, family members, and friends to make sense of their symptoms. People with dementia have told us it can make it difficult for themselves to make sense of their symptoms. While there are several different diseases that cause dementia, they share many symptoms. Eventually, most lead to pronounced shrinking of the brain, also called atrophy. This image, not easy to look at, it demonstrates what the brain of someone with advanced Alzheimer's disease would look like. When you look at the brain on the right versus the healthy brain on the left, you can see that there are profound changes. There are big gaps and holes in the brain on the right, and if you think of our brains as a telecommunications network, you can really see that there are downed power lines all over this brain. The regions of the brain necessary for speech and language are primarily on the left side temporal lobe and the frontal lobe. When damage occurs in these regions of the brain as a result of plaques and tangles, vascular damage, or other protein changes, the person has difficulty with communication. It's not necessary for you to know and remember any of the medical terms that I'm going to mention in the next few slides. This section is primarily to help you understand the physiological changes that are causing the symptoms. Also, you may hear these terms used by medical professionals, and it can be helpful so you can refer back to this information at a later time if you need clarification. The image on this slide demonstrates the key areas of the brain responsible for speech and language. Sound information goes into the brain first through the ears to the primary auditory area, which actually is on both sides of the brain in the temporal lobes. Then the information flows to Wernicke's area. This is named after the doctor who discovered it. This is the language comprehension center of the brain. When this region is damaged, the person has difficulty understanding language that is, what is being said to them. This is also called receptive aphasia. With receptive aphasia, words are difficult to understand or lose their meanings. So they may see a fork, but not understand the word fork. They may recognize the item, but if you say, "Oh, grab that fork," they may not know what that is. From Wernicke's area, information flows towards the front of the brain to Broca's area, also named after the doctor who discovered it. Broca's area is responsible for speech production. It helps express ourselves through language out. People who have damage to this area of the brain have expressive aphasia. They may primarily speak using nouns, verbs, or adjectives, and their speech may be slowed and slurred. For example, they may say, "walk dog," meaning, "I will take the dog for a walk." The motor cortex then sends messages to our mouth and hands as we speak. Damage to this area results in difficulty articulating words or using gestures. Anomia is a symptom whereby people with dementia mix up the names of objects or people. For example, they may call a spoon a fork. They may call an orange an apple, or they may call Fred Frank. Often they speak in generalities or use a word that shares something in common with the word or name they are trying to say. For example, another form of cutlery, another type of fruit, another name that sounds familiar. When we look at this image, what do you think the woman might be having trouble with? She might be wondering, "What is this thing called?" Or she might be wondering, "Is this a dog or a cat?" Or she may not know the specific name. Is this Fluffy or is this Buddy? Hopefully, some of this information may help you to make sense of some of the communication changes you have been noticing in yourself or with your family member or friend. Continuing on, Alexia describes when people with dementia have difficulty reading. A person with alexia may stop reading books or seem uninterested in reading the newspaper, even though they've always enjoyed these activities in the past. It's not lack of interest. It's because their brain cannot process letters, words, sentences. Agraphia describes when people with dementia have difficulty writing. They may begin to have trouble writing checks or may become uninterested in writing letters or Christmas cards, even if it's something that they have done every single year. People with dementia may also say things that are inappropriate or offensive. They may also repeat words or phrases over and over. These symptoms are due to the loss of the filter in the frontal lobe, which is the part of the brain that reminds us of what is and isn't socially appropriate. People with damage to the frontal lobe may swear, joke inappropriately, or seem flat in their communication. They may also have difficulty understanding humor, especially if it is abstract. Other communication losses that may be experienced is a reduction in the ability to pay attention. So someone may lose interest in the middle of a conversation or in the middle of a card game, for example. They may have difficulty remembering what they want to say and lose the thread of a conversation even when they are the one that is speaking. They may have difficulty following along with social conversations or story plots. And you may notice this when perhaps they can no longer watch a television show and are constantly asking, "What's going on? What is she saying? Who is this?" Um, or you may find at big family celebration when there's a lot of people around that it becomes very, very difficult for them to follow along. Often this can be because of a difficulty in filtering background noise, and it can also be because of some of the difficulties with understanding language. They may also have trouble organizing information and thought processes. There's a wonderful quote by Maya Angelou. "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." This is a very important quote to remember in the context of everyday life, especially when we are communicating with a person living with dementia, because even though their ability to express themselves may have changed with the disease, they can still feel and sense emotions. We often hear stories from caregivers of times when they had angry or frustrating interactions with a person living with dementia, and minutes later the person has forgotten what the interaction was about, but they apologize or ask if they have done something wrong. Sometimes they can feel the lingering effect of something bad that happened, even though they cannot recall what it was about. We also hear from families that validating the person with dementia's feelings, rather than focusing on the content of their stories or questions, can be a successful approach. We're going to talk about this a bit later. But first, I would like you to listen to a story. This next story takes just 1 minute. I'm going to play a recording of 3 short stories. And remind you again, it lasts exactly 1 minute. So please pay special attention so that you can answer some questions about each story afterwards. Maybe grab a pen and paper and just be prepared to jot down some notes about each of the 3 stories. Here we go.
Whenever the interpretation arrived, my family almost $100 and was left with a very bad feeling. I've never been outside PCA after a run-in with the Civic Township Patrol this week. Smith and Maddie, his 3.5-year-old my mom, were on their usual afternoon walk from the grocery store on Wednesday when the Pet Patrol noticed something wrong. Smith's leash was attached to Maddie, but not with Smith's hand. It was left to dangle behind the dog. The Pet Patrol recognized the man and dog from previous encounters and proceeded to find out what was going on. Smith scooped up the leash and continued walking, ignoring the SPCA officers. Undaunted, the patrol took up a pursuit and began asking questions such as, "Is this dog viral? Why are we walking without holding? Was he famous?" Smith kept walking.
That was a long minute, wasn't it? So I'd encourage you to spend a couple of minutes thinking about what was that experience like for you? What did you feel while you were listening? How did you react? This exercise gives us a small inkling of some of the challenges that may be faced by people living with dementia. because it may be similar to what it is like for a person living with dementia who no longer has the ability to filter or differentiate sounds and background noise. Did you feel frustrated? How might you have felt if the experience kept going? Might you have gotten angry and perhaps thought or said something uncharacteristic to make it stop? Think about how that might relate to someone who is living with dementia who gets frustrated and angry and, oh, shut up, says something inappropriate. Or might you have disconnected from the recording? Imagine how your self-worth would be impacted or might be impacted if you had similar experiences all day long, every day. Might you withdraw? How might that be similar to someone with dementia who simply becomes more apathetic or less engaged in the world around them? It may simply be that they are having difficulty figuring out exactly what to react to. So hopefully you have a little bit better understanding of the role that communication plays and in how people behave. They're very closely connected. Over the years, we've heard from people living with dementia that the experience of living with the disease can bring about feelings of anger, fear, loneliness, alienation, grief, frustration, sadness, and isolation. Now that you've had a few experiences, and we've talked about this a bit, can you better understand where these feelings might come from? Is it more clear to you the role that communication plays in quality of life for people living with dementia? There's an excellent book called Talking to Alzheimer's by Claudia Strauss. She says, communication is more than a transfer of information. It is the forming of a connection that includes heart, soul, thoughts, and feelings. Because of the damage occurring in the brain, particularly in the hippocampus and temporal lobes, it is not possible for most people living with dementia to learn new ways of communicating. The disease may in fact make them unaware themselves of the disease and unaware of the need to try new ways of communicating. Therefore, caregivers, family members, friends, and healthcare professionals must change their communication styles in an effort to stay connected to the person living with dementia. Because of the disease, they can no longer change, but we can. Because communication is a key determinant of a person with dementia's dignity, self-worth, and quality of life, it's important that we learn communication strategies that will set the person with dementia up for success as much as possible. As the person with dementia's ability to understand speech is impaired, they may be looking for cues in the way we communicate. Communication indeed becomes more than a transfer of words. It becomes a powerful way to transfer emotions such as compassion, patience, and understanding. So again, if you have any questions or concerns about what you've seen and heard, please feel free to contact one of our dementia helplines, Monday to Friday, 9 to 4. You can reach them in English at 1-800-936-6033, in Cantonese and Mandarin at 1-833-674-5007, and in Punjabi at 1-833-674-5003. Also, check out alzheimerbc.org, our website, and go to the Living with Dementia section to look for information and links to handouts on communication.